Hello everyone. Good evening. I'm sharing my screen. So we've created our first REST API in OIC yesterday, and we did test it as well from outside of OIC and from within OIC instance. So I'm just going back into our project. Now, who has created this integration, guys? May I know? SKM REST.
Yeah, Sachin, I created it.
Can you please create your own project and you start building your integrations in that project? Because what would happen is, it would be clean if only the integrations that we create in a session would be there in this folder. Because tomorrow, right, if you want to refer back what Prasad has created, if you come in here, if you see 10 journal import service, you wouldn't know which one Prasad created. Okay. And also
Sure.
don't use UG63. It has to be SKM Hello World REST API, and it should sit in SKM folder. Okay. You can export this one, take a backup of it, and then
or
you can
delete, not a
import
problem.
it. No. You can do it later on. Okay. That's
Sure.
fine.
Okay.
I'm going to deactivate this integration. And if you see here, so we were supposed to discuss the mapping options yesterday, right? So we did activate the integration and we have tested it from within OIC instance and from outside of OIC instance. But we didn't talk about the mapping options that you see here. So first of all, we are in a design mode. And what exactly did we do as part of this integration, guys? To the first name that we are receiving from data source, we have prefixed hello, and we have assigned that to a greeting attribute. Okay, and we already discussed what exactly these options mean. And we have also discussed what does a literal and an expression mode means. Now, let's talk about the options that you see at the top first. Okay, so what are the options that you get to see? First of all, we are in a designer mode at the moment. And as you do the mappings in designer mode, you would notice that OIC keeps generating XSL transformation code. So if you go into code tab here, what is it that you get to see, guys? You get to see an XSL transformation code that is generated by OIC for the mappings that you have done in designer. Now, what's the mapping that we have done? To the greeting attribute, we have assigned this expression, right? To the greeting attribute, we have assigned this expression. Okay, hello in quotes and this first name. Now let's go into code and see what is generated there. Now, what is it that you see here, guys? In the code, you see to the greeting attribute, you see an expression assigned here. And what exactly do you see in the expression? Let me just copy and paste it here. So this is the expression that you get to see. Okay. So whatever quotes that you see, right? Quotes that you put in a designer, quote would be represented this way in XSLT. Okay. So that's how a quotes, hello, and you have quote again, and then the first name expression. So whatever mapping that you do in a designer for those mappings that you do, XSLT code gets generated here. Now, and one important point is it works both ways, guys. So when you do the mappings in designer, code gets generated automatically. And if you make some changes in the code, that will also get reflected back in the designer. If you make some changes in the code, that would also get reflected back in the designer. Say, for example, if I put in 3 additional ones here, okay, I go back into designer, would I see that? Yeah, I should probably validate it. So I'm going to put in 3 additional ones here. We don't see an option to save it here. It says unsaved changes. How do we save it? Let me go ahead and save this. I think this gets saved back in there. So if I make some changes in here, it's going to save the entire web page. Now let me go out of the mapper, see if that gets saved. We should ideally see a save button there. So it says it is successfully validated. Yeah. You could see that it is saved now. But if you go in here, what is it that you get to see, guys? You see that whatever change that I've done in the code, it is getting reflected back in the designer. So it works both ways. You can do the mappings in designer and it gets reflected in the code. And if you make some changes in the code, that would also get reflected back on the designer. Okay, one important point for you to take note of. And if I edit it here, I go into code, that would also have been edited. When exactly do we use code, guys? Two or three scenarios we use it. Most of the cases we use designer to do the mappings. Sometimes what would happen is you might probably do a mapping. You might do a mapping, and after you do that mapping, the entire mapper screen goes blank. Entire mapper screen goes blank, and you don't know what's going on. And in such case, first of all, you need to get your mapper back. So in such cases, what you do is you go into XSLT and you would undo that particular change that you have done recently. Whatever is the last change that you have done, right? You will undo that. Okay, that's one scenario where we use mapper. Another scenario is sometimes we might do complex mappings. Okay, so we might receive a Boolean value from a data source here, and we might probably make use of advanced XSLT functions like a choose, when, and otherwise. Okay, you might receive a Boolean value from a data source, and you might convert that Boolean value into y or n using choose, when, and otherwise. So you might probably do some complex transformation. And whenever you have to do some complex transformation, of course, you can use designer to do it. But if you have to apply that same complex transformation that you have done on one attribute on the second one, instead of dragging and dropping the components and you configuring it again, what we can do is we can just go to code and we can do a copy paste of it. We can do a copy paste of it. So let's say you probably had two attributes in the response. And for the second attribute, if you probably wanted to assign a last name. So what I can do is I can just copy paste the expressions here, and that would get reflected back on the designer as well. Of course, you have to update the IDs as well here. So you would probably make this 25 and you would make this 26. So just in case you want to quickly replicate any of the mappings that you have done on one attribute onto the another one, then also you can make use of code. And whatever mappings that you see, right? So you would be able to see the functions, a lot of them here grouped into categories. And you also see advanced XSLT functions as well. So all of them would help you to do the required transformations. But apart from these XSL transformation functions that you see on screen, there are hundreds of other XSLT functions available as well. Right? So if you want to use them, since you don't see them in this list, you can just go to Google and type in XSLT documentation for that particular function, search for a specific function, get the syntax, and that you can directly plug in here. So if you want to refer to or use any advanced XSL transformation function, advanced or normal, which is not available in the mapper here, in such case also you can make use of XSLT code. These are 2 or 3 scenarios where you would use XSLT code. And we also have an option to test the mapping size. We also have an option to test the mappings. Now, how do you test the mappings, guys, here? So to test the mappings, you see a play option here. Now, the moment you click on play, okay, the moment you click on play, you see that there is a request here. And you might probably not appreciate the test option here in a mapper when you do a simple mapping like this, because all we did is we just mapped one source attribute to one target attribute with a bare minimal transformation here. We're just concatenating hello. We don't even have to test it. We know for sure that it's going to work. But in some cases, you might probably be doing complex mappings, and you might want to test and see if the mappings work as expected or not. How do you do that, guys? You go into a mapper here, and in the mapper, we have 3 options. We have an option, you have an option to generate inputs, Now, when you click on generate inputs, what would happen, guys? OIC will automatically generate a sample payload for the integration. OIC will automatically generate a sample payload for the integration. Now, what is it that we need to do? We need to run this payload. We need to run this payload through the mapper and see if hello is getting added to the first name and is that getting assigned to the greeting or not. Okay. So how do I run it, guys? I click on the, so first I generated a payload. Now I am executing it. I can change the first name or a sample first name here that you have. You can either change it or you can leave it that way. And when you run it, what is it that you get to see? You see a response, and in the response, you see greeting. And to the greeting attribute, what is assigned, guys? To this first name, hello has been prefixed, and you see a hello as well, right? So which means, yes, the mapping that you have done is working as expected. Whatever first name we receive, to that first name, hello is getting added, and that is being assigned to the greeting attribute. It's working as expected. So you might not appreciate the mapper of a test option available in the mapper in a simple integration like this. But once we start building complex integrations like journal input service, you would have at least 5 to 10 mappers within the integration. And you would also be doing some complex mapping as well. You will be mapping 100 fields from source to 100 fields in the target. There would be repeating row mappings as well. So in such cases, the mapper test option would come quite handy. Okay, so it would help you to figure out whether the mappings that you have done works as expected or not. And what else do you see, guys? You see an option to go into a developer view. So if you go into developer view, you see the way attributes appear. You see the way source and target attributes appear would be different. So you see here, if I come back, so you see hello, a request sample payload, you see template parameters first name, right? So you see the normal names there. But the moment I go into developer, you see the attributes as if you are looking at it as a developer. Okay, so you get to see the internal name or actual name instead of first space name, etc. And XSLT, you know very well what happens, right? So if you uncheck it, if that is not checked, then what is it that you get to see in the components, guys? First of all, if you expand this, you get to see a list of components. And under components, you see functions and operators. Under functions, you see a whole new group of functions here, grouped into categories. And you have operators as well. Apart from these functions, if you need advanced XSL transformation functions, like choose, when, and otherwise, or for each, etc., then you need to tick this one. And when you enable this, only when you enable this, you see that additional option popping up. And that is what we call as XSL constructors. And when you expand this XSL constructions, what is it that you get to see? You get to see a flow control. You get to see a flow control, and here you see the functions. So if you want to do some advanced XSL transformations in a mapper, maybe you want to use choose, when, and otherwise to convert a Boolean value into YRN. In such cases, you can make use of advanced XSLT functions. Now I'll show you how exactly this would be handy, or how exactly we use for each, choose, when, and otherwise. We will see the usage of these 4 functions in journal input service. Okay, so when we do the journal input service first mapping itself, you would understand how these advanced XSLT functions work. And what else do you see, guys? You see that there is an option to view the mappings here, right? So view the data types. Let's say, for example, if you click on this one, click on show types, what would happen, guys? Whatever is the data types of those attributes, you will be able to see. So if I click on show types, so if I take it off, you don't see the data types, right? But the moment I click on show types, what do you see? For each and every attribute, you see the data type. Especially say, for example, first name, what is its data type there? It's string, right? Where did we pick that? Where did we mention that? We mentioned it in a template parameter. We selected a data type. And a greeting has been created as data type of string. How did it create? How did it pick up a data type as string? What's the sample payload that we used? We said greeting, equal to hello ABC, right? So since we assigned a string value, it has created a greeting attribute of data type string. So if you click on show types, you would be able to see the data types for each one of them. And we also have an option to apply a filter here. So for example, in this case, you just have one attribute on the source and one on the target, right, guys? But when you do complex integrations, you might see 100 attributes here, 100 on the target. And out of 100 attributes, you might probably map only 30 of them. Okay, and those 30 are not in sequence, not the first 30 that you are mapping, but out of 100, you're mapping 30 of them. Do you want to make sure that you have mapped all the 30 attributes, guys? We just want to be sure, right, that we mapped all the required 30 attributes. How do we do it? We can come in here and say, boss, don't show me all the attributes. Instead, show me only the mapped attributes from the source and from the target. That way, what do you see? Everything else gets filtered out and you only get to see the attributes that are mapped. So this way, I should be seeing 30 attributes here. A quick way for me to verify if I have done all the required mapping so far. Okay. And I can take out that filter as well if I don't want to see it. And we have an option to undo and redo the changes that you have done. So if you have probably done some change, and if you want to undo or redo it, so this is undo and this is redo. And you have an option to maximize it, just if you need more space to do the mapping. And when you click on this one, you get to see the components. You get to see the components. Now let's go ahead and save this. And apart from this, what else do you see, guys? You see connectivity properties, guys. We don't do anything with this one. You can just ignore this. You would see connectivity properties on the source and on the target. We really don't use any of them in any of the integrations. And you would be able to see 3 tracking identifiers here, tracking variables. What did we enable as a tracking identifier for this integration yesterday, guys?
First name.
First name, right? And that is exactly what you're seeing here. So instead of tracking variable 1, you are seeing first name. And if you have probably enabled the other 2 tracking variables as well, you would be able to see those values here instead of tracking variable 2 and 3. Now, why are you seeing them here? So just in case you want to do any mappings with these attributes, tracking variables also, you can make use of it. And apart from this, you also see integration metadata here. Now, what does a word metadata means, guys? When do we normally use word metadata? It means integration metadata means it contains the data about the integration itself. Okay, it contains integration metadata means it is the data about the integration itself. And again, you have 3 details in it: integration details, runtime, and environment details. So if you expand integration details, what do we get to see? We get to see its name, version number, and identifier. Runtime, what do you get to see? You see the instance ID, meaning what is the request ID created for that particular integration run and who has invoked it. Okay, remember when you trigger an integration, you pass in a username and password, right? Remember we passed in OIC username and password yesterday. So that username would be stored here. And environment details, you would be able to see the instance details there. Like what is the base URL of the instance? Is it a dev instance or a SIT or UID? Now you might be wondering, right? You might be wondering, Prasad, why did Oracle or why did OIC made all this information available in the lab form? Where exactly does it come handy, guys? So let's take a scenario. Yeah, say for example, you're building a journal import service. And from a journal import service, I want to send a notification to the GL team after the journals are imported. And in that email, through that email notification, I want to let the team know whether the journals are imported or not successfully. Now, tell me one thing, guys, when I send out that notification, assume that the client has 4 OIC instances. And if I send out an email, first in that email, do I need to mention from which instance I'm sending out that email, guys? Yes or no?
Yes.
That's a first thing that user would want, right? Boss, I received a notification and you didn't mention whether it came from production instance or UAT or SIT. Okay, so first they would want to see from which instance we have got it. Where do you get those details to include in a notification? You would be picking up the environment details here. Now, the second thing, when you send out an email, can we just say that journal batch has ended in warning, please have a look, and not mention any identifier in it, or not mention any tracking fields in it? Would that help, guys? Say, for example, if Abhinav is from GL team, I send email to Abhinav saying that Abhinav, journal input service errored out for batch 5005. Of course, if batch name is a tracking identifier, and if Abhinav knows OIC a little bit, he can go into observability and he can search with 5004. But that's not how you normally send notifications, right? When you send notifications, you try to include the runtime details as well. Like, what is the request created in OIC to process that batch 5004? And how do we do it? We do it by including the instance ID. So if I'm from a GL team and if I receive that notification, if I have an instance ID, what do I do, guys? I immediately go to monitoring section, apply that search for that particular instance and look at it. Yes or no, guys? Would it help?
Yes.
Include the request ID. Yeah. And what's the third thing? The third thing is integration. Of course, I cannot just send an email to a team, to a support team saying that integration error out, please check, without including the name or identifier or version, right? There might be 100 integrations. They wouldn't know from which integration you've got that. So obviously I have to include integration details. So for these details would come handy in those scenarios, guys. Normally when you send out notifications or in any other scenario, if you need to access meta details about the integration, all of them are available readily in the mapper. Okay, so that's for the integration details. Now you go ahead and save the integration. And I would go ahead and activate it. Now let me go ahead and activate this integration, guys. I don't know which one is mine. Let me go in here. I'm going to export this. Why don't I see an option to export? Okay, can you create it again, Sachindra? Would you mind doing that?
Yeah, I'll be able to do that. Please delete it. Not a problem.
Okay. I'm going to delete it just to avoid confusion, and I'm going to activate this integration. Now we discuss options available within the mapper, right? So let's focus on the activation options. So when I activate an integration, first of all, you see that there are three levels of, there are three tracing levels that we can set. I thought of talking about this later on, but that's okay. I'll explain it now. We can set the tracing level to either production or audit or debug. Let's see what happens with each one of them. Say, for example, if I set the tracing level as production, what would happen, guys, with this one? All the activities outside the loops. What does a loop means, guys? Within the integration, we can have a for each loop and a while loop. Okay. So all the activities outside the loops, meaning which are not part of for each loop or a while loop, plus the invoke and a logger activity. Remember, within the integration, I can use a logger activity to print some message. Invoke activity means if you invoke any connection in the integration, that is called as invoke activity. So if you select the tracing level as production, all the activities outside the loops and outside loop, all the activities will be captured. And within the loop, only two activities will be captured, guys, invoke and logger activity. Within the loop, only two activities would be captured, invoke and logger activity. And yes, all activities outside loop, within the loop, only two components get captured in the activity stream. And this data will be retained for a period of 32 days. So what does it mean, guys? It means if I activate this API with a tracing level as production, first of all, the moment I activate it, and if let's say we trigger the integration, there would be an instance created. that instance would be available for 32 days. Okay, that's point number one. Point number two, what details do you get to see in the activity stream, guys? You get to see the activities outside loop. Remember, in this integration, we don't have any loops. So everything that happens in the integration, you would be able to see that particular details in the activity stream. And if there were loops, then only these two activities would be visible within the loop. Those details would be captured in activity stream. So let's select production, 32 days, and the activities outside the loop, two activities inside a loop will be captured. Now let's activate it and see what happens. I've set up, what's the tracing level that I've set up? This production, right? Now I would go ahead and run it. Now when I run an integration now, yes, let's test it with John as input. Run it. Now the moment you test it, what is it that you get to see, guys? First of all, you've got hello John. Okay, this is no surprise. We've done it yesterday as well. And you could also see an instance created. You could also see an instance created. And sorry, not the instance. I tried to open this in a new instance. Okay, we don't see an option to copy the link. First of all, if you see an instance generated. And since the tracing level is set to production, what is it that you get to see, guys? Whatever has happened, remember within the integration, we just had 3 nodes. And for all the 3 nodes, whatever has happened within the integration, you were able to see the integration activity in the activity stream. Okay, so if I go into monitoring section, observability, integrations, I would be able to see that integration instance here. And I can click on the first name. You would be able to see the green color highlighting. And within the integration activity, what is it that you get to see, guys? You would be able to see that at what split second integration reached the trigger and when did it start the message processing, when it crossed the mapper, when the message was sent back. So every step, date and timestamp has been captured, right? And only the date and timestamp is captured, guys, not the payloads. Remember, guys, I'm not sure how many of you still remember it. Yesterday, when we tested the integration, did we see the payloads, guys, at each and every node? But we're not seeing them today. Because yesterday, when we tested the integration, I have set the tracing level to debug. So when you set it as production, you would be able to see only the flow, integration activity in the activity stream, no payloads. And you see an integration instance created, right? For how many days will I be able to see this instance, guys, in OIC? 32 days.
32 days.
Okay, so this is clear for everyone. Now let's go ahead and deactivate the integration. Let's activate it again. This time what I'm going to do is I'm going to select audit. Now, when I say audit, what does it say, guys? It says it uses a keyword called additionally. Please pay attention to it, guys. What does it mean? It means that whatever you see in production would be applicable in audit as well, plus wire payloads of trigger and invoke activities are shown in the activity stream. Okay, and for first of all, if you select the tracing level as audit, the instance would be available for 32 days. But the wire payloads that you see, sorry, if you say audit, it would not be retained for 32 days. Instead, it would be retained for 8 days. It would be retained for 8 days. And the wire payloads of trigger and invoke would also be shown in activity stream. So in addition to the integration activity, meaning what exact step has been crossed at what second, you would also have payloads captured at 2 activities, trigger as well as invokes. So if you have invoked 3 or 4 connections, at each and every node, you will be able to see the wire payloads. Let's see what happens if we set it as audit. And for how long the data would be retained? It would be retained for 8 days, not 32 days. Let's go ahead and activate it. Let's test it as usual. Now, what is it that you see here, guys? You would be able to see, you see that there is first of all, you see only the payload here. Okay, so since we have set it to audit, the wire messages at the trigger node should be visible, but you're not able to see it here. Let me open the integration instance from here. So you would be able to see the payloads captured only at few nodes in the integration if you select it as audit. So I go in here. I'm going to select the second one now. And what do you see, guys? You see the same integration activity, plus you see an additional payload. And this payload you see only in the response mode. Only in the response mode. Okay. I think it probably said it would show the wire payloads for trigger as well as the invokes. But since we are not invoking any of the connection within the integration, only in the response node, we were able to see the payload here. This would be the case in case it is audit. If it is production, you don't see payloads for any of them, just the integration activity. If it is audit, integration activity plus the payload for few nodes. What would happen if we do it as a debug, guys? I'm going to activate it. And this time I'm going to say debug. And when you say debug, it says not recommended. And why is it not recommended, guys? It is typically not recommended in production. What does it say? It says additionally means whatever you see in production integration activity plus the wire payloads in the trigger and invoke nodes, plus you would also see all the payloads and all the activities inside the loops are shown in activity stream. But at each and every node, you would see the payloads captured, guys. And it would be retained for a period of 24 days. Sorry, 24 hours. Okay, if you say debug, data would be retained only for 24 hours. And why is it not recommended? So it is not recommended in production instance. Remember, guys, in dev, SIT, and UAT, we usually select debug so that it will be easy for us to understand what's going wrong. Whenever somebody tests your integration as part of the SIT or UAT, or whether you do the unit testing, debug would always help you to easily figure out what's going wrong. But we don't do it in production for two reasons. What are the reasons, guys? When you say debug, first of all, at each and every node, the payload gets captured, right? So which means there would be a lot of log files that get generated for every integration run. Remember, guys, in this integration, you only had one mapper, right? But in case of journal input service, you will see 30 nodes. So if I say debug, 30 log files will be created. So that would always, that would definitely slow down our system, right? Because it's going to generate a lot of log files and it's going to occupy the memory. And it also poses a security risk. Why is it a security risk, guys, especially in production? Because in production, we would be dealing with the actual information. Let's say, for example, if it's a HCM information, HCM integration, we would be dealing with the actual employee information, maybe including the SSN numbers or personal ID information would be there. Or if it's a finance integration, you might be dealing with journals information or a payment information. So what Oracle does is to make that information available in the log files, what Oracle would do, it would have to write all that, it would write all that information and put it in the system. It would put it to the log files, right? Since that sensitive information is going to stored in a log files on the Oracle side, since the payload gets logged on the Oracle side, it is a security risk. So for these two reasons, since it's going to slow down the system and since it's a security risk, selecting or setting a tracing level to debug is not recommended in a production environment. And what is it that we normally do, guys? You can either set the level to audit or production. Ideally, production is suitable for production instance. You can also go in for audit if you want, but definitely debug is not something that you should select. You should not select debug in production. But debug is good until dev, SIT, and UAT. And if your next question is, Prasad, then how do I debug issues in production? We don't debug issues in production itself. So first of all, if you set the tracing level, even with the production, you would be able to see Even with production, you would be able to see the green color highlighting. You still see the integration activity and you would know which node has error. It's just that with a payload and with the knowledge that you have in the integration, you would work out what could be the payload that has been passed as input to it. And then you try to replicate that issue in a different instance, debug it, identify the root cause, identify the fix, and then you promote it to production. You get it tested in a previous instance as well. Okay, that's what we normally do. And we also have one more option called allow to run again. I'm not particularly sure on this one, guys, but I'll tell you what I guess out of this. So this, it says, earlier we didn't had, I'm not sure how many of you are with EBS background, but did you guys hear a term called incompatibility earlier, guys? Incompatibility.
Yes.
So sometimes what might happen is when one instance of this particular integration is running, we might not want another instance to be created of the same service. Okay, we had that option in EBS and other products as well. So allow to run again. What this means is if I don't take this one, what would happen? Or if you take this one, what would happen? First of all, when you run again an integration, it creates a new instance and runs again any transactions. Can it get worse than this, guys?
Yes.
I just want to search for the developer who has written this particular statement. He could have been more elaborative and he could have mentioned it in 10 different ways. Oh, but what we can make out from the statement is if you say allow to run again, which means if there is one instance running for this particular integration, since allow to run again is checked, when client triggers the integration, a new instance would be allowed to be created. And that might again pick up a transactions that might be available there. So which means you could have output to keep it simple. Multiple instances can be running at the same time for a single integration to keep it very simple. And if you don't pick this, then what would happen? What I guess is if one instance of the integration is running, you might probably not be allowed to trigger the integration one more time. Okay, so that's what I make out of this one. And unfortunately, we don't have any helpful nodes as well available. So even if you put your mouse on top of it, it doesn't help you. So these are the actions that you get to see. Now, let's go ahead and activate this integration, guys. And I'm going to set the tracing level to debug. And I'm going to activate it. So one more thing that we need to be aware of is, so you see that it is in active status, right? So when the integration is in active status, yes, we can test it from within OIC instance. And this option would be available only for REST APIs. And apart from this, we can also test the integration from outside of it as well, right? How do we do it? We can click on endpoint data. And when you click on endpoint data, you will be able to see endpoint metadata. You see the integration endpoint URL. So I can test this integration endpoint URL from a Postman tool. And when I test it from a Postman tool, how did we do it, guys? Did we test it yesterday?
Yes.
We have tested it yesterday, right? And I'm not able to see that request here. Yeah. So not this one. Yeah. So this is the integration that we have. This is the testing that we have done yesterday. So we copied this integration endpoint URL, and when we tested it, we were passing in a first name, and we passed in basic auth. We passed in the username and password to test the integration. Now, why did the basic auth work, guys? When you trigger an integration from outside of OIC, in what format you pass in the credentials to the integration, what would be determining that, guys?
Connection policy.
Connection, the trigger connections.
Trigger connection.
Trigger connection security policy is going to determine that. So since I said OAuth token 2.0 or basic auth, since basic auth is also allowed, I was able to test the integration passing in the OIC logins as a basic auth. Basic auth means you pass in the username and password. If I have probably selected this as OAuth token, okay, so let me save this. And what does it say, guys? It says that, remember, I changed the security policy here, right? And this connection is used in this integration, which is already in active state. Now, for this security policy to change that we have done to take effect, there are unsaved changes. Click Save and Reactivate if you want to apply the connection changes to active integrations. So for this security policy change to be applied to the active integrations where this connection is used, instead of just clicking on Save, I could do two things. I can save it and I can go to the integration manually, deactivate and reactivate. Otherwise, what I can do, guys, I can say save and reactivate. When I say save and reactivate, what would happen, guys? First of all, the integration connection change would be saved, and you would also see the integration gets reactivated. What does it mean? It means once it is reactivated, now if you trigger this integration, we should pass in security policy as OAuth token, not as a basic auth. Now, would this request work, guys, if I send it now? Yesterday it worked, right? Would it work now?
No.
What is it saying, guys? Unauthorized. Okay, let me change this to basic auth, only basic auth. I'm going to test the connection. Okay, it's 100%. And when I try to go back, what does it say? Again, you get to see the save option. So what does it say? Connection is in trap status. Connection is not in trap status, right? I'm going to save this. Yeah, when I click on save, what does it say? It says save and reactivate again. I'm going to reactivate the integration. It is active now. Now, would this work, guys? It works now because I said only basic auth. So since this security policy is matching here, it works. Now, I've also told you why some clients might not be okay with sharing the username and password, right? First of all, we take utmost care. And when we are sharing OIC logins with the third parties, especially, what role do we assign to the user, guys? Service invoker role is what we assign. So that what would happen? Even if the third party tries to act smart and log into OIC instance, they would not be able to see any of these navigation options. Okay, but still, some clients might not be okay with sharing the OIC instance username and password with the clients. In such cases, what we do is we can make use of open authorization token authentication, OAuth 2.0 authentication. How does this work, guys? So for OAuth, open authorization 2.0 token to work, you can select either of them here, or you can select only OAuth 2.0. Only OAuth 2.0 means by default, if you create a REST trigger connection, this would be the case. So you can make use of this in case the other system, which is supposed to, remember, client is going to trigger this REST API end of the day, right? So if they are able to trigger the REST API and pass in OAuth token, then that's completely fine. Even if you say OAuth 2.0, that's okay. They would be able to generate a token and they pass in a OAuth token for authentication. But if the third party, which is supposed to trigger our integration, doesn't have the capability to generate OAuth token, then there's no point in we selecting it just because it is available in OIC. So we select the security policy depending on the capability of the other system, which is supposed to invoke our integration. Now, how does this OAuth tokens work, guys? Let's do it this way. Let's talk about it in tomorrow's session, guys. I need some details from OCI to show you how this OAuth token works. I'll show it to you in tomorrow's session in detail because I need a client secret and a client ID for it. I need to get the IDCS domain URL as well. I don't want to get, I'll explain it tomorrow in detail. Yes, Abhinav.
Yes, I have a couple of questions, Prasad.
Mhm.
First question, since we discussed about the mappers today, so can you just go back to the mapper and I want to add something in that. Because I was, I was working on it. So initially we were just passing first name in this REST API connection. What if I want to send the last name as well? So how I am going to map that last name?
Okay, did you try it in your integration?
Yes, I tried it, but only at the target node, we are just getting one greeting, right?
Okay, where
So
is your integration?
in the project AV,
Okay. Okay, so this is your integration. Okay. So you are receiving two input parameters here, first name and last name. So
yes,
what is it that you want to do? You want to concatenate first name and the last name and assign it
yes,
to greeting, right?
exactly.
So what do you do in such case? Can anybody help here? I
Yes,
just
we can
break this
directly
out.
use
Just
that
need
last
to,
name here itself.
You say first name, comma, at the
Last name.
top the last name.
But okay, but hello is something which we also required, so I
Then
did
you
it.
can
I
add.
will use
one
the
more.
concatenate again.
Yeah.
Yes,
No, you don't have to add two more concatenates, guys. Concat by default it says
that's
two
fine.
parameters, but this would also take in three parameters as well.
Yeah,
You can do a quick test if you want. So you can
all right,
generate payloads, run it, and you see hello,
Yeah.
first name space last name.
perfect. All right,
Okay.
I did it,
Yeah.
but I don't know why my test was not coming perfect. Second thing I would like to ask here is, in the Gen 2, there was an option to recommendation here.
That's
So,
taken out. That's taken out. We don't have that feature.
all right, all right. Thank you.
Any other
That was
questions, guys?
actually, yeah, that was
Yeah,
actually
Prasad,
helpful.
one question for
Yeah,
you.
yeah, pretty helpful. Yes, please go on.
Yeah, if we create integration under projects, it's not populating on design integration level, right?
It doesn't work.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay,
but
fine.
that's a whole a reason behind giving the projects. Why did Oracle give projects in first place? Earlier, it was not there. Only if you want access control, you would use projects. If you don't need access control, if there's only one integration team, then you don't need projects at all. You would put everything in design. So what you put in design doesn't come into projects. What you put in projects doesn't come into design, because that's the nature of it. That's how it is designed,
Yeah, okay,
basically.
Prasad. Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, guys? Okay. Thank you, guys. See you tomorrow.